Hi, this is Andrew Davey with Let's Talk Nevada, and we're here today with former Assembly Member Pat Hickey. We're talking today about a big issue that will be on our ballots, question 2. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew. Nice to see you again.
Yes. Well, first off, Assemblyman, I do want to get this out of the way. A little earlier today, Suffolk poll dropped, and my goodness, according to Suffolk, your question 2 is passing by 24 points. What do you have to say about that? Are you concerned that maybe you're losing momentum?
Frankly, I haven't seen that poll.
Okay.
I heard some chatter about it, and someone said, "Gee, it also showed that Brian Sandoval only enjoyed 50% support in Nevada." So I think his numbers are much higher, and frankly, I would guess ours are much higher, and it's going to be a close race.
Yeah.
Polling is so difficult on this issue because it's really how you ask the questions, because much of the public, frankly, doesn't even know it's on the ballot. They may have somewhat of an opinion. So a lot of education still is going to be done for those that choose to educate themselves and read and listen to your presentation. Yeah. So we're not worried about polls, even the positive ones that we've done and found.
Yeah, well, I've heard this from all sides that it's just so hard for pollsters to get a good likely voter sample in the state. But I bring that up because earlier in the summer, there were some polls that dropped that suddenly showed a much tighter race on question 2, and it got a lot of folks asking because the original assumption was, well, Nevada tends to be a libertarian state, want government out of our lives, so of course, let's legalize pot.
Again, polls notwithstanding, I think there is that sense of Nevadans that, hey, we're in the business of legalizing vices, so to speak. So
I was going to get to that next.
Okay, but when you really get down to this, I mean, this is a 13-page referendum that is going to create a law, if you will, or statute that cannot be changed for 3 years. And, a lot of people, frankly, don't know some of the things that are in it. For example, there are no opt-out clauses such as there were in Colorado, where even to this day,
opt-out as
for counties and local municipalities
who don't want
it. In Colorado, most people don't know this, but 2/3 of counties and municipalities in Colorado have not allowed dispensaries, even with decriminalization. We don't have that in Nevada. Another interesting thing for even proponents is that there is no home cultivation or home grow allowed in this bill, because it's basically protecting the dispensaries and the larger investors who I tend to call big marijuana, because I see the comparison with big corporate interests like big tobacco.
And I've seen this issue pop up before. I know it's even been an issue when marijuana legalization has been on the ballot in California in the past, and that brings up an issue. Just this whole issue of regulation. Ever since medical marijuana has been legalized, even though voters passed the initiative in 2000, it took about 12 years for the legislator to finally come through with dispensary legislation.
Right.
Now, I've heard a lot of back and forth over, well, look at how long it took for us to take care of medical marijuana. Can we really handle this next level of recreational marijuana? But hey, if we just fully legalize marijuana, then the regulatory framework should be much easier going forward. So, and what would you say to folks who say, hell, we already have medical marijuana, why not take the next step?
Well, we do have it, but we have a lot of problems and challenges still with it to regulate it appropriately and fairly. and make it what it ought to be, really provided for persons that believe, and even their doctors would believe have legitimate needs that might be met by medical marijuana, which, by the way, no one too is not opposing medical marijuana. But
it won't affect medical marijuana.
No, but to your point in Colorado, where yes, it did take 12 years, even for them as well, to go from medical to recreational. And during that time, they had the opportunity to actually develop a regulatory infrastructure. And I will tell you this, that the counterpart to our person in the Department of Taxation told them and told me when I visited on behalf of Governor Sandoval that it's going to take Nevada much longer than we anticipate. It will be far more complicated, and maybe most importantly to the taxpayers, it's going to be far more costly to set this up. I think we're ill-equipped and ill-prepared on such short notice. And to your point, why are we in such a hurry? My answer is the business return of those that are investing is they can't make money off the medical marijuana industry unless it morphs into recreational. They won't get a return on investment. So to me, this is about green stuff, not that's rolled into joints, but it's put into bank accounts, except that you can't have
the friendly part.
Right, except you can't have a bank account because it's still against federal law.
Yeah.
So it's a cash-only business, which presents problems in and of itself.
Now, one issue that I've noticed come up lately is this whole issue of public safety and public health. I noticed recently the Nevada Medical Association came out, no one to citing those concerns. However, I see recently the Yes campaign has fired back. They claim that the No campaign has misrepresented data coming out of Colorado, that there isn't a rise in teen use of marijuana. There's no rise in DUIs. Everything's just hunky dory over in the Centennial State. So why not join them?
Well, it's not hunky dory there. I mean, people can pull out facts from both sides, and probably both sides do somewhat generously. But let's go back to your earlier point. Yes, the Nevada State Medical Association came out in a unanimous vote, and I met the head of that at Governor Sandoval's recent prescription and opiate drug conference. Okay, we recognize there is an epidemic of drug abuse in this country, frequent with prescription drugs. But this is something that they've studied, and we should look to the medical community. It's one of my arguments. If we're going to take a huge public policy step to legalize marijuana, why shouldn't we have it debated when the medical community is there, when law enforcement, with the faith community, with business, with educators, advocates, and others? It ought to be done in the legislature and not in a special initiative that was funded by out-of-state moneyed interests.
Now, I'm sure proponents would counter, well, again, it took 12 years for the legislator to finally come through with the dispensary bill for medical marijuana, and you have Governor Sandoval and Senator Reed, but they're part of the establishment, and this is the year of the outsider, and shouldn't the people finally have a say on this?
Well, look, I was in the legislature, as you know, for an interesting period, two different decades, two different centuries. That's probably why I made room for someone younger. Thank you, Andrew. But the argument was made about funding for schools. I'm going to make the connection here. That the legislature will never be able to get together and broaden the tax base and spend more necessary money on schools. That, in fact, changed, as you well know, in the 2015 legislation, where we had a long and sustained debate for the 120 days begun by Governor Sandoval
on tax reform.
On tax reform, and ultimately an increasing attack, something that was controversial and not easy to do for any elected person, but especially Republicans who joined with Democrats in doing just that. Why can't we have that same debate in the legislature? Especially, for some of the concerns about incarceration rates and decriminalization, which I'm actually for. What I'm not for is just a wholesale retail commercialization of something with a lot of health and public safety concerns, including for young people. And we can pull statistics about Colorado.
Yeah.
Common sense. Can anyone really tell me that if we legalize, popularize, and make more accessible a recreational drug, that there's not going to be higher use in the overall society, both legal and illegal? That's not been the case in Colorado or Washington State. Overall use, and some of it legal, is up 19 to 20%. Here's an interesting fact that I just found today from Quest Diagnostics, and they don't have a horse. They're not. They do drug testing. Okay,
they're not involved in politics.
They're not involved in the politics. I suppose their business will get better with legalization because employers are going to be more concerned about drug testing. Their most recent results found a 47% spike in the rate of positive oral marijuana test results in U.S. workplaces between 2013 and 2015. And that's exactly a period when it's been legalized. I don't see exactly their results in Colorado. But so let's be honest. If we legalize it, advertise it, and by the way, one of the problems that I have with this, there is nothing in question 2 that does anything to regulate potencies, which is a big concern in Colorado, to regulate edibles, or to in any way deal with advertising. So we're going to see, just like we do drreefer.com all around the 215 Beltway here in beautiful southern Nevada, you're going to see
anytime soon.
Yeah, you're going to see advertising in abundance here, and nothing in this does anything about. We ought to have this discussion in the legislature.
Well, funny enough, we just heard from someone from the Yes on 2 campaign say they also want the legislator to take care of this. They're hoping once question 2 passes, the legislator can follow up with some additional regulations, such as what.
Well, they are, and the reason is because they will admit there are so many problems with this poorly written proposition as it is right now, that there are many things that are going to have to be dealt with. Now, one of the problems is in Colorado, after the next legislative session had 71 bills trying to clean up after. If anybody remembers the famous picture of Mark Amity following Dean Heller on Nevada Day on his horse scooping up the poop, that's what the next legislative session is likely to be doing. And I would argue, having been there, we have 120 days. And Tick Sagerbloom has said, rather proudly, the next legislative session, if question 2 passes, will be the session on marijuana. Well, I happen to think that there's probably more important things before the state.
Such as I've already heard that apparently there may be some additional budget issues next session.
We've all heard that, and I'm not a legislator anymore, so I don't pay as much attention. I'm not privy to, the specifics of that.
Yeah. So we've seen with the legislator, and only 120 days in the session, there's only so much you can get done.
Right, and only every 2 years, and if it becomes distracted, that there's our equivalent of 40 or 50 bills that we have to do to make this thing, done.
Yeah.
Properly, I think it could literally hijack the next legislative session.
Now, since I just brought this up, proponents say that if question 2 passes, that means at least $60 million more dollars per year, or $120 million per biennium. Money the state can use for schools. Money the state could use for public safety. We've had readers talk on our site about the larger issue of, well, when you really think about it, this could be a major benefit to our state, to our society, as long as it's properly regulated. Why would we turn down additional revenue?
Well, and that's an argument that's fairly compelling from the proponent side. But the other side of that ledger is that with increased drug use, public health costs will also rise. I would say likely outweighing any of the additional revenue from legal marijuana. For example, and we want to regulate like tobacco and alcohol, which is their thing. So when you look at both of those things, for every dollar gained in alcohol and cigarette taxes, $10 are lost in legal, health, social, and regulatory costs. I mean, so tobacco and alcohol are not money gainers. They're, in fact, to society, money drainers.
And yet alcohol and tobacco are already legal in the state.
No, they are. So, but what I'm saying is by legalizing another thing that creates potential health costs, problems with addiction, problem with workplace, absentee, all those things, there will be the accompanying cost that society is going to pay for. The other thing is, your number wasn't quite right. Even the proponents say they predict about $20 million when all's said and done for schools. Now that's good. You could say, well, gee, that's
20 is less than 60.
Yeah. And but those are their own figures. Because one thing in Nevada, different than Colorado, some monies went to education first in Colorado. In Nevada, under question 2, we're third on the list. First, it goes to the Department of Taxation to make itself whole for the expansion and the growth of its bureaucracy. Secondly, counties and cities will be reimbursed, and then whatever's left will be put into the DSA account. So it can't help with policing. It could help with schools, but even 20 million, what's that get us? Clark County needs 24 new schools, or so we hear. I've checked with the Clark County School District. To build one elementary school now costs $35 million, a middle school is $66 million, and a high school is over $100. So in real dollars, $20 million divided by 20 or 17 counties, maybe Clark County gets $15 million, doesn't even build them a half of one elementary school. And then with the other related costs that I think are going to outweigh it or cancel them out, what does it really get us?
Well, again, they're saying if we pass this, at least it means some additional money for the budget. And as we discussed
earlier, means a lot of money for their investors.
Well, sure.
A little money for schools, but a lot of money for their investors.
But
that's
still,
for sure.
As we discussed earlier, with that major tax fight we saw last session with the legislator, sometimes it feels like pulling teeth to get any kind of major revenue-raising tax reform passed. So why pass on even the smallest opportunity to bring in more revenue?
Look, it should be difficult to raise taxes, and I say that as someone who paid a political price for agreeing to do so. It should never be an easy decision. I mean, most states, Nevada included, require 2/3 of lawmakers so that it's not just 50% and we can keep raising taxes. Even California has 2/3. So it should be difficult to raise taxes. It should also be, this is a complex issue, as you're certainly aware of. It shouldn't just as we said, you shouldn't budget by the ballot box. Why should we do a public policy issue as serious as this, with health, public safety, education, youth, workplace issues, just done because a special interest can come in and get a ballot initiative qualified in Nevada and spend a lot of money to get it passed?
Well, since we're talking about our other favorite issue, regulation, proponents argue, hey, casino gaming's already legal in Nevada. We're a pioneer when it comes to quickie marriages and quickie divorces, and at least in many of the rural counties, we even have legal sex work. Right. So would it really hurt us if we just add recreational marijuana to our already large portfolio of legal vices?
Well, ask the casino industry. And, they pay the majority of the taxes. I think they've been pretty good corporate partners to the larger community, along with the, profits that they've certainly earned. But they don't think it's going to be good for tourism. They don't think it's going to be good for business or for workplace. That's why the Nevada Resorts Association has, unanimously voted to oppose this and are actively supporting the defeat of it. And that's the state's largest industry. So, if you thought, well, gee, that'll bring more tourists.
That's what the Yes campaign.
Yeah, they think it's going to bring more tourists, right?
Since they're showing figures that they're showing figures from Colorado ever since Colorado passed its initiative in 2012. Despite concerns there, tourism and tourism-related revenue continues to rise.
There's no doubt about that. They have a spike and an increase in tourism to Colorado, in the wake of legalization. And we would probably see a short-term one as well. But Colorado's also beginning to experience problems. Most recently, and I'm happy to show you a report, the Denver Visitors Bureau and Convention Center just released their 2015 polling of their convention goers. 50% of them said they would seriously consider not returning to Denver for conferences or conventions because of problems they personally experienced along the 16th Street Mall. Again, in a climate of legalization where, according to some of their surveys, they smelled marijuana everywhere. Okay, now, do we want or need that in Nevada? Again, the casinos don't think that they do. Now, I'll make a kind of flippant remark, but I think it's half serious as well. Marijuana tourists that come to Nevada, are they going to be spending money in the shops, in the shows, in the restaurants, or on the casino floors, or are they going to be just out watching the water show at the Bellagio?
Well, over the course of my summer travels, I've spoken with some folks here who seem pretty hopeful. Hey, look at what's happened in Colorado. Look what's happened in Washington State. Why shouldn't we cash in?
That's right. I bet you some of those people you've talked to are people that are invested in the industry. And hey, I'm pro-capitalist. Don't get me wrong.
As well as some taxi and Uber drivers who seem hopeful of this new wave of tourists coming in because, hey, reefer madness, not such a bad thing.
No, but I will tell you this, and nothing against Uber or Lyft. I voted for that. I think it's a great entrepreneurial new communications and transportation thing. But just less than a month ago, an Uber driver brought 10 young women to a bachelorette party at the Hard Rock Casino in State Line. My relatives happen to own the place in Douglas County, State Line.
Yeah.
And they went for a bachelorette party, have a nice time before a young woman gets married. Wonderful. He sells them some marijuana because he claims that he's getting it from a medicinal store. One of them had a medical marijuana card from California. We have reciprocity. Bottom line was 10 of them all went to the emergency room. So, that is one example of you're not going to get rid of persons that are still dealing marijuana illegally. And especially with the online presence, when tourists come to Nevada, if you're a tourist here and you want to experiment because it's now legal, do you want to find where the dispensaries, and maybe you're in a convention and you're a teacher, you may not want to see your principal down buying some at a dispensary like this. You're probably going to go to the internet. And how are you going to know on the internet whether it's legal, regulated, or others? You'll probably look for the lowest price, which probably means they're illegal. So it's not going to get rid of the black market. It's not going to get rid of people that are making money off it, and it's going to make it more difficult for police, although I'm not in... police themselves would say they don't want to arrest people for simple possession anymore, and it rarely happens. So with respect to the incarceration issue, and I, again, am someone that doesn't want to see persons
Yeah.
in jail for nonviolent drug offenses. I really don't. It's a waste of. I'd rather educate than incarcerate. Yeah, I think you know that about
Yes.
me, and I think most sensible public policy people. The reality is, the most recent Department of Justice statistics, and this is the Obama administration, who have been rather libertarian on this issue, revealed that only 0.7% of all state inmates currently behind bars are there for marijuana possession only, with even many of them pleaded down for more serious crimes. So most of the people who are in jails are for drug dealers. And again, although the proponents like say we're going to get rid of all that, that has not been the case in Colorado. The Attorney General has said we still have many cartels. They are active. They are moving in.
Even with legalization.
Yes. One of the most popular drugs in Mexico, marijuana, is Colorado marijuana because it's genetically modified, new strains. It's much better than Mexican grass. And so gray markets and black markets are shipping it to Mexico because it's so good. So to think that we're going to get rid of illegal persons that make money out of something that people seemingly want, that's a pipe dream, pun intended.
Well, we might as well close with this. Ever since he was first elected as governor, Governor Brian Sandoval has talked about building the new Nevada, diversifying our economy. We now have Tesla, Switch, Faraday, and who knows, maybe an NFL team coming here. We've heard economic experts speak about the need for Nevada to no longer be a one-trick pony. We can't just rely on casino gaming anymore. So why shouldn't we consider the opportunity we have here, as proponents describe question 2 as, we pass this, we properly regulate marijuana, and that can at least help somewhat in diversifying our economy, bringing in new tourists, helping small businesses.
It's a very good way of framing the question, because I believe all of us would like to see a new Nevada. And the examples you gave of Switch and Tesla and Faraday and others to me are an example of socially responsible investing, because there we're going to produce a new workforce, or people prepared to assume it, who are doing better in school, have new skills that are not reliant upon the tourist industry.
Like we've done in the past.
Yeah, and really marijuana, if you're saying, well, we're going to get most of our money from the tourists, frankly, it
may just be more of the old Nevada.
I would rather see STEM graduates working at Switch than high school dropouts working in pot shops myself for our economy.